Hello everybody and welcome back to Picked at Dawn on YouTube. At the end of the last video I said that this video was going to be about sweet pea planting, but over the weekend I changed my mind and decided that I needed to prioritise a different job. That job is to deal with some perennials which I bought in autumn last year as bareroot plants, and they need planting now basically. If you're not familiar with the term bareroot, that is a bare root. Now, when I buy these plants, you can only buy them like this in the over the autumn and winter. So they get lifted from fields where they've been grown when the frost hits, when the perennial becomes dormant in the ground. Then all the nursery people go around and lift up sections of perennial plants, because perennial plants are the plants that come back year in, year out. Now what you can do with perennial plants is you can slice them up into pieces. So what I'm holding out here for you is a piece of a peony, which was dug up last autumn, probably, I don't know, end of October, beginning of November. It arrived to me in mid-November. Now when they arrived, they didn't have any of this top growth on. You wouldn't expect to see that, because all perennials, well these perennials particularly, die back, so all their top growth wouldn't be existent at that time of year. So don't expect to see this when you buy bare root plants. If you buy bare root roses, you will see obviously the wooded stems, but with herbaceous perennials don't expect to see top growth at that time of year. Now it gets delivered with the root system intact. What's changed now, because we're in the back end of March, is to save these plants basically and look after them over the winter. What I do is when they arrive, I put them into pots with compost, and then I keep them in the polytunnel and I water them over the winter. Now what's happened is, you can see there, it's started to develop its root system again, because obviously it's had its roots snapped to a point when it's been lifted out the ground. So now it's starting to redevelop its root system. Now we could keep this in a pot for another year, and many people would advise to do that, but I get really busy here, and I'm starting to get really busy now, but particularly over the summer months it is just mad busy with weddings and cutting and all the other field-based jobs. So I just know what I'm like, and I can preempt the fact that I will undoubtedly, if these are left in pots, forget to water them, and then the plant will suffer. So what I choose to do at this time of year is, once I see they've developed a root system and they're starting to grow and the soil's warmed now, and we're forecast for a nice spell of weather this week, so it'll continue to warm. That's not to say it's not going to go cold again, but at the minute it's warming up, and it's warm enough for me to sit with my bum on the ground today and talk to you. So it's also warm enough to put these plants in. Like I said, this is a perennial, so this one's going straight in the ground today, and I've got many other plants that I'm going to be dealing with over the course of the week, and I'll show you how I plant those out. These here behind me are all my peonies that are already established. So these plants here arrived to me like this 6 years ago now, I think. Yeah, about 6 years ago. And when I moved fields 15 months ago, they'd been in the ground for 5 years, and I decided that was the time to actually lift them up and divide them, because they were really big clumps, and I thought, if I'm going to lift them anyway, I may as well slice them into chunks. So that's what I did. So last year these peonies along here didn't do amazingly well. I wasn't expecting them to be honest, because I'd sliced them to pieces, but this year they've chunked up really nicely. So I'll show you now what they look like after a year of being in the ground from their little slicing up episode. So there we go, that's what the peonies look like now. So this peony was sliced up last year, like I say, probably to something not much larger than these pieces here. Last year they didn't flower, and well, they sporadically flowered, let's say, but I didn't cut from them at all, and this year they're looking a lot happier. So all that remains now for me to deal with the more established plants is I'm going to go around and have a little weed through gently on the top surface with any little weeds that might be deciding they want to join in. and get rid of those, and then I'm going to give them a mulch with some compost over the top, and I will also give these guys a feed with chicken manure pellets. Now, in terms of dealing with these new peonies, what we have to do, to introduce these to the ground, is you'll see here with the peonies, I actually choose to grow them through landscape matting. The reason that I do that is that these grow into really big bushy plants. I'd expect them to be about this in width in about 6 years time, but it takes them a fair number of years to get to that point. Now, what I don't want to be doing is leaving a big area between all my plants, because that's what I'd have to do, and staying on top of all that weeding, because it's just far too much work when you're going on a scale like this. So I do choose to grow my peonies through landscape matting. So I've burnt a hole there in the landscape matting, burnt rather than cut, because if you cut, the edges of your landscape matting frays, but if you burn it, then it's singed at the edges and you don't get that fraying. Dug out some of my lovely clay soil, and into that hole I have to make sure that when I've dug it, because I've got quite heavy clay here particularly, I want this plant to be able to establish quite quickly in its root system to get out, so I don't want it to have a hard edge basically to the wall of the hole that I'm planting into. So I've made it a lot wider than the root system actually is. I'm not trying to shove it into a tiny little hole. So I'm going to hold that there, and that is been held at the crown of the plant, is at the top of the soil line, maybe just a little bit below with peonies. And then that is just the compost that was in the pot that it was growing in over winter, and then it's just simply a case of breaking up any large clumps of clay. Oh, a little weed got in there. Let's hope he doesn't decide to sprout in the future. Getting rid of any stones or large bits of debris, just like that. And then I am nice and kind to my new plants, and I do tend to break the soil up a little bit around the top. But as you can see, that's really nice soil. These peonies are going to love it in here. More little weeds trying to grow, get rid of them. And there, that soil line has just come just slightly above the crown of the peony plant there. Get all the rest of that soil back on top. Trying not to smother him. That little worm as well, put him back in his house. And then they'll get a good drink, and probably, as with everything on this flower farm, a good dose of chicken manure pellets, and that's them done and set. And in a few years time, 2 maybe 3 years time, we'll have loads of flowers off these peonies. But they are a long process and they do cost a lot of money, but they are beautiful once they establish, so they're worth growing. So the next plant that we're going to be dealing with is this funny looking plant here. This is polygonatum, or some people call it Solomon's seal. So it is a spring flowering plant. It will not flower this year because it's a new root system here, and it will take time to establish. It's quite a different root looking system to other perennials, and this has a rhizomous root system, so it grows from a rhizome, which is a bit like a dahlia, and it has a root system a bit like mint as well, so it spreads along the ground, this does, and then it produces its shoots from its root system. So basically it's a law unto itself. Now I am not going to plant this in landscape matting like I did with the peonies, because it would be silly, because I actually want it to spread. Now the other reason that I'm showing you this plant particularly is when it comes to planting perennials, unlike annuals, a lot of them have more specific requirements as to how and where they'd like to be planted. So it is worth taking a note of what the plant that you're about to put in likes and going with it. Now these plants here, like I say, like to spread, and I want them to, because that'll get me more flowers, and they also like to be in semi-shade. Now if I'd planted them over where the peonies are, they would have been in full sun more or less all the day, so that would have been no good, and it would have also been no good because half of that bed is covered in landscape matting. So instead I'm planting them on this side of the field underneath my line of trees, which goes right to the top here. So I'm going to plant underneath my tree line with things that either self-seed and I want them to, or they spread like this. So down the bottom end there I've got honesty and things like that. And here I'm going to plant this plant. Now all that remains to be done is for me to go through weeding this bed with any weeds that have decided that they want to live here. That seems to be an ongoing theme. And get rid of, my field has got some nasty great big rocks in it, so I don't want those because my little plants can't multiply. I did in a couple of weeks time, when there's a bit more top growth on things and you can see things a bit better, I'll do a bit of a walk around tour with you of the field so that you can see where things are laid out and how, and I'll explain to you why they're laid out. Because one of the things that was really important to me with this field is that everything would be zoned into flowering time, so I wouldn't end up with something flowering down here at this end of the field and something flowering right up the top end of the field at the same time of year. It just cuts down my walk time between the flowers when I'm picking them and when I'm maintaining them. So anyway, we are currently sat in perennial zone number 2, and today I am going to be planting out some of these. So this is Dicentra, some people call it bleeding heart, and it is a really beautiful, put it back up there so you can see it, a really beautiful early flowering perennial. This is Dicentra alba, so it's white, and as you can see there, it is just starting to put its developing its root system, get all of these bare root perennials into the ground. So in this bed here, I'm just preparing the ground with my hand hoe, taking out a few weeds that have decided that they like it here as well. Well, they're not allowed to stay because these need to go in. So I'm just going to prepare the ground, and then I'm going to get these planted in this bed. They're going to go at a planting distance of approximately that, which is about sort of 40 to 50 centimetres between each plant. So that is, I'll get 2 in this bed this way, and then I'm going to work my way up the bed. I haven't got enough to go right to the top, and to be quite honest, I don't need that many. I think I've got 24 of these, and then I have got some perennial geranium Pheum alba to go in as well. So there's a bit of a white thing going on in this bed. It's a really beautiful, dainty little white flower. Not a massive vase laster, I must admit, but it's really pretty. And it's really good for event work and stuff like that. It's just a little dancing flower, and I really like it. Anyway, so there's going to be some geranium going, I keep saying geranium going in this bed. The geraniums are over there, which, because it's lovely and sunny today, I've decided to start to flower. That's geraniums for you. Anyway, let's get these perennials in. Right, so I'm on to planting the geraniums now, and I just wanted to show you something. I'm on to planting the geraniums now, and I just wanted to show you something, because like I said before, when you buy bare root, because the time of year that you're buying it, generally it won't have any leaves on it, and you're just planting a bare root. And then it's not until the spring that the leaves start to come through, obviously with the temperature increase. But if you look at a pot like that next to it, this has got a geranium in it as well, hopefully. Sometimes some plants can just be slightly delayed in the time that they want to come up, or you might have planted the roots slightly deeper, or it's not got as much water as the other plant, various reasons. But do not lose faith, because I'll show you. Yay! It would have been really bad if it was actually dead, wouldn't it? There, I shall focus in for you. That geranium there is still actually alive, and it's fine to plant up. It's, oh, more growth there, look. It's just that it's obviously a little bit of a late starter. So I just wanted to show you in case, always check your pots before you discard them, thinking that you might have killed the plant or it might have gone over on you. Always knock it out first because it might just be a little bit buried. There, another geranium, quite happy. Admittedly, not as developed as that one, but it'll still be fine. Time to get them in now. That's it. That bed done now. Well, 2/3 of it. We've got the dicentra at this end and the geranium at the top there by the wheelbarrow. And now I'm going to show you the most important part about the process of planting new plants. And the most important part is the watering in. Now I know you probably heard people say give plants a good drink when you first plant them, but I do see sometimes when people are planting and they just give a little tiny sprinkle. That there is a good drink. That's what you want to be giving them when you first get them in, because it helps the soil settle around the root system. There is a dicentra in there, and it also helps the plant establish, and the stronger the plant establishes, then the easier it'll find it to self-sustain. So it'll go out then and look for its own water. So for all I'm giving them a lot of water initially, thereafter they should be stronger and healthier plants, so it should hopefully need less. So the next variety of plants that I'm putting in are my Sangosorba. That is the leaf there just coming through. I don't know if that's in focus. It's quite difficult to see in the sunshine. And I just wanted to show you the planting distance that you need to consider with perennials, because obviously he's quite small at the minute, and this, by the time he establishes this summer, is probably going to foliage around about here and here. But in another year's time, it's going to be coming right out to here because they multiply in size every year. So if I had planted my Sangosorba, there's one that I've still yet to plant, here, right next to my path, then in a year's time, it's going to be trying to grow onto my path, which will leave me, and if I'd done the same with the asters on that side there, it would leave me no space in my path. So that is why I'm only putting one Sangosorba right down the middle of this bed, right to the top, because I need to leave enough space. That is my plant bed there. By the time I put the other path in here, I've got a path on that side, and then I'll plant and put a path in. I need to leave enough space either side so this plant can multiply out in size, hopefully, and not hang over the side of my path. So you need to be aware of that when you're planting perennials. So there you go, we've made it to the end of the perennial planting. Well, nearly the end. I've still got a few more to put in actually. I just thought I'd better explain why I've changed my clothes numerous times in the video this week. That is because this week has also been Mother's Day week, so I've had quite a few various jobs to do, which has meant a lot of running around for me, delivering flowers and workshops and things like that. So I've just had to squeeze in the perennial planting as and where I could during my week of jobs. I didn't have a full day to do it in, so that's why I started the week off in my waterproofs and raincoat and wellies, and then I think I progressed into a jumper, and then we went into shorts and t-shirts, and now we're back in a jumper again. It's because it's been filmed on all different days. But the reason that I wanted to film this video for you and talk to you about bare root perennials is it might be something that you look at ordering for yourselves in autumn, particularly if you're a flower farmer. It's a really good way of increasing your perennial stock fairly cheaply. They do work out a little bit cheaper than buying potted perennials, and they're, you know, you're getting a good established chunk root system most of the time, because they've come out of a field. So I just tend to feel they're a little bit more hardy than the plants that have been sown as seeds and grown in a warm glass house. I just think they're a bit tougher generally. The other reason that I choose to buy bareroot perennials sometimes is because it can be, as a goose just going to fly over my head. There you go. Sorry, I got a bit distracted there. Anyway, the other reason that I choose to buy bareroot perennials sometimes is because I can be buying things like the peonies or the polygonatum, which is something that takes a long time to establish from seed. And I don't want to be sitting and looking at a plant for 3 years before it reaches the stage that we've just put into the field today. So sometimes it can be to do with longevity of germination period and establishment period, and sometimes in the case of this plant here, it can be a case of me wanting to make sure that, as best I can, that I am getting a true to variety plant, because this is a Strantia shaggy. Now, number one, I have been trying to grow a Strantia shaggy as a variety for a lot of years now. I started off buying the seed, and the first batch of seed that I bought, it just wasn't fresh seed and it never germinated, no matter what stratification techniques I used, either you know, keeping it cool and then letting nature take its course and it warm up. It just wasn't going to germinate that seed at all. And the second year that I sowed it, I sowed it and it germinated and grew, and then I was biding my time for a couple of years until it grew into a fairly established plant and it started to flower. And then instead of it flowering white with a lovely shaggy ruffled petal like you'd expect shaggy to, it actually flowered bright pink. So I was pretty upset about that, to be honest, but I kind of got over it because it's an alright flower anyway, the pink one. It just wasn't what I wanted, and I felt like I'd wasted a lot of time waiting for that plant to mature, and it wasn't what I expected. So if I'm buying from a nursery and I know that they've lifted it from a bed of shaggy, then I expect it to be shaggy. So we're holding out a lot of hope for this plant this year. I hope that I've shared some hints and tips on planting perennials and the different things that you want to be thinking about, and how you deal with perennials if you're buying them bare root in the autumn and you overwinter them before you're ready to plant them out. Like I've said in the snippets of videos that I've been doing, many people would choose to leave these in pots for another year, and if you have the time and know that you can look after them, then that's absolutely fine to do that. I would try and get them in before they get pot bound, but if you want to establish them into this size pot, this is a 9cm pot, or pot them into a bigger pot as they grow, that's absolutely fine as well. It's just not the right thing for me to do in my setup. I don't know what next week's video is going to be. It depends what I have to prioritise as a job next week, but they're my sweet peas. They're laid on the floor. They are actually planted. So I think this next video will actually be about me putting some posts in there and tying those sweet peas up. Otherwise, they're going to end up as a ground cover crop rather than a climber, and that is not ideal. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed, and see you next time.